I wonder how Michigan fans liked my last video.
Ay, Santa Maria!
And hello, Internet! Welcome back to the Game Addicted Show. I am your host, Alex, and we'll leave it there for now, because I don't know you. I'm not just going to go give you my last name and the last 4 digits of my social. I can't make that type of commitment, okay? You got to give me some space. I actually had a pretty great week. First, I saw this happen.
All these cars are in the way.
Oh my god, it's the Batmobile. Oh. My only real regret there is not washing my window. Kind of embarrassed about that. But, come on, Batman, you kidding me? Really? And I feel like I'm forgetting something else important happening. Do you remember? Oh, that's right. UCLA finally took Stanford down for the first time since 2008. I love you stupid bear. Fun fact about that game, I was actually at the 2008 game when Kevin Kraft in those final seconds threw that touchdown pass to beat Jim Harbaugh and the Stanford Cardinals. Corey Harkey, what a catch, seriously. Oh, man, just really dates me how old I am now. Jokes aside, this is the show where we use the VPI formula to break down teams to see who's hot, who's not. If you haven't heard of the VPI formula, it's because it's my own thing. I made it up. It's where we take some numbers, preferably the strength of schedule of teams and their opponents and opponents' total offense, total defense. We sprinkle some fairy dust, we believe, we close our eyes, and then we get these magical rankings every week of where teams should be according to what they've accomplished this season. So last week we had a lot of fun breaking down who's in the playoffs, who's out. Well, we've already established, Michigan, you are done. It's over, man. Just give it up already. But there's still plenty of teams in the thick of it, including one team that had a major upset this weekend. So let's jump into this week's segment of Who's In? So let's go ahead and start this off with the team I was just alluding to with Wisconsin, who was upsetted by Illinois. Now, Badger fans, I know you're thinking, throw in the towel, we're done with the season, it's over, we're not going to go to the playoffs. Not so fast. Now, yes, you dropped to number 13 in the AP rankings, and yes, even the VPI rankings here, you dropped to number 14, and it's not a pretty picture. But there is quite a bit of hope because, as I mentioned here almost every week, the Big Ten is the best conference in college football, and it's not even close. So, with that being said, I've looked at your schedule, I looked at the VPI of those opponents. You still have Iowa, you still have Minnesota, sorry, drawing a blank there. And of course, the biggest game of the season, Ohio State. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but you handle business, you get back on track, and you're right there in the path to the playoffs. Don't give up, Badger fans. You're still in it. And next, let's talk about Penn State. Now, with Penn State, they had such a huge victory over Michigan. And I've mentioned before, Michigan fans, I'm sorry it's over, but it's Penn State country now. They are number 6 in the AP polls. And ironically, they match up in their VPI rankings as number 6 as well. They are in perfect position within striking distance to make a move. They still have Ohio State in their schedule. They still have enough big games left to really make that push into the top 4 spot. So Nittany Lions, in the thick of it, they got a great shot here, so just keep up the good work, guys. Now, of course, we can't speak about the Big Ten without speaking about the big dog themselves, Ohio State. Now, I've mentioned before, all roads go through Ohio State. Each one of these teams mentioned at some point would have to play Ohio State in order to get into the playoffs. And Ohio State was ranked number 2, barely being edged out by Wisconsin last week, but now they are the clear number 1. They just have to take care of business, and they are in. It is done. I've mentioned before, the Big Ten is so strong, it's not crazy to think they might have a chance to have 2 teams in the playoffs. It's not something I'm pushing for. I personally don't like when conferences have 2 teams in the playoffs. And also, things have to happen with other teams and other conferences, so it's not a guarantee, but I'm just saying if there's any conference that will do it, Big Ten has the best chance to pull that off. All right, now to move on to the conference I love talking about, and that's the SEC. So let's start with the obvious, Alabama. Yes, they're ranked number 1 in the AP polls. Actually dropped number 7 in the VPI, but don't worry, they still have plenty of big games left, specifically with Auburn and LSU. So as long as things play out the way they will, and if Alabama wins out, they'll be at least number 2 or 3, but probably number 1 by the end of the regular season. And again, I apologize about the noise. My puppy's just going mad over there when I talk about the SEC. She just can't take it. Moving on next in the SEC, it's with Auburn, the one team I like to campaign for whatever reason. I like this team a lot. They still have a strong strength of schedule in front of them. They're ranked number 9 in the AP polls, number 11 in the VPI polls, which really makes me happy that we've come to the point in the season where the VPI formula and all the data enter into it is starting to reflect a lot of what the AP polls are seeing. And I'm really curious to see how much it matches with the playoff committee. What's great about this is that I put no bias or anything into this formula. It's strictly just the numbers as I see them. And yeah, for those of you who've been following from the beginning of the season, you're starting to see that this formula is starting to match a lot what we're seeing out there and give us a real good determination of which teams really are deserving of these rankings and which ones need a little bit of work. But Auburn still in great position to make the playoffs. Now, speaking of this whole VPI formula and boasting this whole thing for myself, if there is one team that really deserves an apology, it is LSU. I've been ragging on this team all season, just looking at my data. I'm like, this team is overrated. What are they doing in the top 4? What are they doing in the top 2? It was maddening for a while. But lo and behold, this weekend, punching the numbers, now LSU is number 2. They've slowly been climbing up the ranks, and apparently the voters saw something that I couldn't quite see yet. But with LSU, you are now number 2. In fact, the SEC, who I was ragging on, saying they're not even the second best conference, just moved up to second best conferences this week in the VPI formula. So maybe not the best news for me, but it is a great week for the SEC, and things are looking great for all 3 of these teams. Last week, I was bringing up a miracle scenario for Oregon to make the playoffs, and using the VPI formula, it's really interesting what happened this weekend. Now, Oregon needed to beat Washington. They needed to beat Arizona State coming up. And they had to hope that Utah wins their division and plays them in the Pac-12 title game. But something happened. They were actually eliminated from contention without doing anything. See, the VPI formula looks at teams' strength of schedule, and it will adjust accordingly. It doesn't just give teams the nod the second they claim a big win. It actually reevaluates teams every week. So if teams that they beat start losing, it's going to lower their VPI score. So what happened with Oregon this weekend, I'm going to look at my iPad real quick. They actually played Colorado, which lost to Washington State. Cal, who lost to Oregon State. Stanford, who lost to UCLA. Thank you. And even Nevada lost to Utah State. So this huge hit in their strength of schedule actually dropped Oregon, even though they beat Washington. So readjusting, they're basically out of playoff contention, and they did nothing but beat the team in front of them. So looking at this going forward, yes, Oregon technically is kind of in it with the AP polls. I'm really curious if the committee is going to look back and reflect on the teams that they beat to see where they ranked them. But as of right now, according to the VPI formula, Oregon, you're out. I'm sorry. So last week, I spoke about Clemson and my concerns about a team that could continue to win, but also drop in the rankings because of the struggling ACC. And I mentioned that the ACC was actually ranked 6th among all conferences. Well, here's some good news. With the turn of events of some things in the Pac-12 this past weekend, the ACC actually rose number 5, still behind the American Athletic Conference, which we'll get to a little bit later. But with that occurring, and also with Wake Forest continuing to win, going back to the top 25, setting up a nice matchup down the road if Clemson continues to handle business, I think they are solid in the playoffs. I know that we can't always rely on their past history to carry them through, but I think that's a justifiable resume that they're building up right now, and we'll see how things shake up in the ACC, but Clemson still in the playoff hunt. So let's go ahead and move on to the Big 12. Now, last week I was really questioning if Oklahoma really deserves to even be in the playoffs. Now, they did move up in the rankings, moving up to number 9 in the VPI, still at number 5 in the AP polls. But looking at the strength of schedule, again, the only notable game is against Baylor. And considering they don't really have anyone left on their schedule, it's really hard to argue that Oklahoma should be in the playoffs. So we'll see how things shake up. I'm not saying they're out. Remember, the VPI rankings don't dictate who gets in. It's the committee. But what I am saying is, will the committee look back at Oklahoma's strength of schedule, specifically with their non-conference schedule, and say, is this a team that really deserves to be here? So really a coin toss with Oklahoma right now. So we'll see how things play out. So now let's jump into the dark horses of all dark horses, and that's with SMU. Now, SMU, for whatever reason, every week is in our top 5 VPI rankings, and this week's no different. And some of you really might be questioning, how the heck could this school be in the top 5 when they're ranked ahead of Alabama? How is that even possible with the mighty SEC? Well, there's a few things to look at. One thing you might point out is that SMU doesn't have that huge signature win. For a while, their biggest win was TCU, but one thing to note about SMU is that they don't have any Division II schools on their schedule, and their strength of schedule has been solid all around, and they continue to rack up wins. Their schedule is pretty balanced. Now let's take a team like Alabama, who plays in the SEC, which, yes, is a better conference, but what separates these two teams is Alabama has a Division II school on their schedule, which hurts your strength of schedule, and also played the worst team in college football, which is New Mexico State. They are ranked last in their VPI rankings. So you take those two things, and that's why SMU outranks Alabama in our VPI rankings. Crazy how math works. So is Alabama a better team than SMU? Clearly, you would have to be a madman to really believe that, Alabama would lose to SMU out of 100 games. But just looking at their accomplishments and how they continue to climb up the AP polls, I think people are starting to take notice. And if there's any team that has a shot to just bust into one of these playoff spots, it's SMU. I'm telling you, keep a close eye on this team. And that is it. We are done with another week of our VPI rankings. You survived. These videos, I try to keep them short. I don't know why they keep getting longer and longer, but I am doing my best to try to get information as quickly and as concise as possible. Next week, we are going to dive into Week 10. There are still a lot of big matchups to be played out. The committee's polls are just so close to being released, and I'm really curious to see how much to reflect what we calculated here. As I mentioned earlier, I've been really excited to dive into these numbers every week, and what we're seeing from when we first started this, where the rankings were all over the place, and now, with all the data we've collected, it's reflecting more and more of what we're seeing in the AP polls. And what's been great is we've been able to bring to light some teams that maybe aren't getting as much recognition because maybe they aren't a traditional powerhouse, or maybe they don't have like a huge signature win, but a lot of solid victories across the board. So let me know down below, who's in your top 4? Who's your dark horse? I am Team Mustang right now. I am huge on SMU. I think they got a great shot. I'm not saying they're getting in, but I'm saying if there's any team that has a shot, it's Team Mustang. And as always, guys, a like and subscribe goes a long way. Butchered my words there, but we're really looking to build this channel and try to make something fun in this community. So any help would be great along the way. But as always, I appreciate all the support, and I'll see you guys all next week. Goodbye.